Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning back into the Automation Podcast. This week, I meet up with Aaron Moncur from Pipeline Design and Engineering to talk about what he thinks is the most important skill to have in industrial automation. And we also talk about his upcoming event, PDX, which is coming up just in a few weeks. And we even have a coupon if you want to go to save you $50 off the admission price. And we also talk about his podcast. He has over 300 interviews with engineers from all kinds of backgrounds. And I think you guys will find that interesting as well. And we just had a great time just talking and chatting about different strategies and different challenges we've had over the years in the automation world. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into our interview with Aaron Moncur of Pipeline Design and Engineering. I want to welcome to the show for the first time, Aaron. And we have a very exciting topic to talk about today. Should be very interesting to all you controls engineers and you high-end electricians and technicians out there do automation. But before we jump into the discussion, Aaron, please tell the people a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for the introduction and having me on the podcast. I've been excited to talk with you. I have my own podcast as well, actually. I'll touch on that a little bit, but I love talking about engineering and business and automation. My company, Pipeline Design and Engineering, we've been around for about 15 years now. And our focus is industrial automation. We're integrators. We also do a lot of just test fixtures, smaller, not necessarily automated, but manual fixtures, things like that, machine building. We actually started 15 years ago in general product design. And so we did a lot of medical device design, consumer products, things like that. And then about 3-4 years in, one of our customers asked us if we could design a test fixture for them. And we said, what's a test fixture? Yes. And so we figured out, what that was all about and delivered it. And they really liked it. They said, this is great. We need more of this kind of thing. And so ever since then, slowly but surely, we've been moving more and more into that area of like fixtures. And then at some point we started adding a little bit of motion, a motor and a pneumatic actuator. And then at some point we started doing full automation. And at this point, that's kind of our focus is automation, machine building. And we still do test fixtures and a little bit of product design as well. But I have a degree in mechanical engineering. And I've been doing this for a little over 20 years. Interesting story of getting laid off and then starting my company and just living the dream here with a wonderful, wonderful group of people doing engineering and automation work.
I've worked with a lot of custom machine builders over the years, and a lot of what they do is test stands. And a lot of them are automated. And some of the most interesting ones I've seen were a lot for medical devices and whatnot. A lot of them are for things that we use every day, like the pieces that go in your door, like the door switch and the windows, that set them up and down. And those things need to be not only assembled, a lot of time pick and place type of systems, but they have to be tested. And they got to be tested a lot, like millions of times. A lot of times if they're prototypes, they got to go through some very rigorous testing, and sometimes lots of data collection that goes along with that. So I get an idea for what you're saying, and some test stands and actually manual assemblies. Sometimes you just need a bunch of jigs and different layouts so you can put something together quickly. And in manufacturing, something that has to be done by hand as well. So very interesting stuff. And so with that said, I know we wanted to jump into a couple different ways here, but I do know, before we get too far in, you do have an upcoming event. So I wanted to make sure we get to talk about that a little bit before we jump into the topic of, the meat of what we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, thank you. Something that's really big for me, important for me, is building community around engineering. And we have a few ways that we've done this. We have our podcast, Being an Engineer. We also have an online community called The Wave. It's thewave.engineer. Free resources and tools, education for engineers. And then we also have an event called PDX. And PDX stands for the Product Development Expo. It is inclusive of all things hardware. So that includes, product designers. It includes metrology folks. It includes automation experts. Basically, anyone who touches hardware, developing hard goods products would be a good fit for this event. The PDX event is happening this October 21st and 22nd. That's a Tuesday and a Wednesday, just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. And kind of the unique, innovative format of this event is that it's not just like a trade show where you show up and you get a flyer or a brochure from a vendor. The focus of this event is training and education. It's kind of like a 2-day boot camp for hardware professionals, whether they're mechanical engineers, automation engineers, manufacturing engineers. And so we have about about 35 experts in the industry who are going to be there as instructors training on different topics. These include AI tools for engineering workflows, GD&T, tolerance stack, modular extrusion for machine frames, robot programming, linear motor, motion control, precision fluid dispensing, CAD data management, FEA, engineering documentation, simulation, DIY, PCB design and prototyping, 3D scanning, reverse engineering. So it's pretty extensive. There's something for everyone there. Again, it's a 2-day event, a training boot camp, October 21st and 22nd, just outside Phoenix, Arizona. You can go to pdexpo.engineer to learn more about the event and sign up. The cost is $295, and that's inclusive of all the different training topics that you can choose to sign up for at the event.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good deal too. If you have somebody junior on your staff, or if you're changed roles in your company and you're getting more into this kind of type of product design and engineering, then definitely check that out. You typically can't go anywhere for 295, right? So,
Right.
just to walk in the door for a day is typically it's not. And I know that the people out there, they're probably going to have some services that they can offer as well, that some of you guys may want to take advantage of. But for you folks, especially if you're in the area or if you have a need at work for one of these things, please check it out. And if I get it correct, it's pdexpo.engineer.
That's right. pdexpo.engineer.
Excellent. And speaking about engineering, of course, you're a mechanical engineer. We see a lot of mechanical engineers in automation as automation engineers, especially when it comes to systems that have servos on them, systems that are very, a lot of acceleration, a lot of mass, systems that require more than just, a very sequential type of logic that, we have lots of parts moving around that have to be in certain places at certain times. And so, can you tell us a little bit about, your journey as the owner of a company and kind of how you came to this conclusion about the most valuable resource in automation? We're not going to give the answer away yet, because then we wouldn't have a show. But in any case, can you talk a little bit about that, your journey and what you've gone through and the different things you ran into and learned?
Yeah. I think there is a very underrated skill in automation, and it's not something that people talk about very often, but over 20 years in the industry, I've definitely seen this over and over and over. And so we're going to talk about that today. In terms of my journey, how I got here, I worked at an engineering company 20 years ago, and great company, very smart people. And in the beginning, I loved it. I got to do all the things that I enjoyed, right? CAD design and prototyping and, working on a mill and a lathe to make some parts and assembly is wonderful. Then the economy slowed down, right? This is back in 2006, 7, 8, 9.
Hmm.
And I'll just call it the fun work, the quote unquote fun work kind of dried up. And what our company had left was kind of a lot of documentation and paperwork, not fun work, at least by most engineers' standards. And I was young and probably immature, and I kind of checked out mentally. I'd show up every day and I'd put in the hours, but my heart wasn't in it, and my mind wasn't really in it. And the owners of the company, they were, intelligent people. They could tell that my heart wasn't really in it. And they pulled me in one day and said, "Hey, Aaron, unfortunately, we need to let some people go. And we can tell that you're just not very engaged right now. So you are one of the people that we're going to let go." And it was a shock. It shouldn't have been, right? Like looking back, hindsight is 2020. I should have seen it coming, but Again, young, naive, immature. I didn't. So it was a shock. My wife and I had just bought our first home. We had a new child, right? Our first kid had just been born, and so it was a gut punch for me. And I remember feeling physically ill for several days after that. But eventually, I got my feet back underneath me and decided, okay, I need to figure out what's next. What am I going to do? And the first thought was, well, I'll just go out and find another engineering job. But I started thinking, and it was true. What the statement that the owners of this company had made, saying you weren't very engaged, and I thought, you know what, they're right. I wasn't very engaged. Why is that? What happened to make me disengaged? And I thought that maybe I had fallen out of love with engineering, and so I had actually been doing some side hustles when I was still employed at the company. I'd started a photography company with a buddy of mine. I'd started a little web design company on my own. I was even exploring commercial real estate. So kind of very different things, right, than engineering, and thinking to myself, I don't know if I like engineering anymore. I think I might just want to do something completely different. Well, a few months into that, my father-in-law, he pulls me aside and he says, hey, what's the plan here? Like, what are you going to do to, he didn't come out and say it this way, but support my daughter and my grandchild, right? And he suggested that maybe I did still like engineering, and maybe it was just the way I was doing engineering that had turned me off. And I thought that's pretty sage advice. I'm going to take that. And so I jumped back into engineering. Only the way I did it differently this time was, instead of going out and looking for another job, I just started doing it myself as a freelance engineer. And I would just call companies up and say, hey, I'm Aaron. I've got some good engineering skills. These are the things I can help with. And lo and behold, I got a few jobs, some small things. Didn't pay well. I remember working 60, 70-hour weeks and getting paid like $35 an hour back in the beginning. What was so interesting was that I loved it. It was so fun. All of a sudden, I loved engineering again. I was back in it. And what I learned about myself back then was I really thrive on high level autonomy. When I'm given responsibility over kind of the entire machine, as opposed to just being a cog in the machine, that's what really lights me up and gets me excited. So that was the start of my company, Pipeline Design and Engineering. We did largely consumer product design back then, medical devices, things like that. And then we talked a little bit about the test fixtures, and that led into machine design and automation. And these days, that is our focus. Everything from kind of desktop to standalone, maybe 5x5 by 7, 8 feet tall, something like that. That's our sweet spot for automation and engineering. Along the way, I decided the company where I worked before, great company, good people, for sure, right? Very grateful for the experiences I had there. Nevertheless, there were some things that I didn't love about the culture at that company. And so I decided, when I started Pipeline, I really wanted to focus on developing a wonderful culture where people they liked being here. They enjoyed the camaraderie with the different team members. They enjoyed the work. They enjoyed the environment. And so building a successful culture was really important to me. And you might be thinking right now, okay, culture, that's the underrated skill. Well, it is one of them, but it's not the underrated skill that we're going to arrive at. So stay tuned. But that became a big focus for me. And it is to this day. And there have been a variety of things that we've done to cultivate a culture where people really love being.
I was thinking about what you were just saying, and I was always surprised. I'm thinking about it. I'm like, as a parent, I was surprised how different the personalities of my children were. And I'm thinking as you're talking, I'm like, man, they're so different. And then when I started visiting customers after I got my college degree and got into this crazy industry, and I was visiting, helping customers with their PLCs and other products, I was amazed how different company cultures were. And some of them were definitely toxic. I mean, it came to the point where you'd be like, yeah, I'm not going there. I don't care if they never buy anything from us again. They're just so toxic, right? And the salesman, I was always a technical guy, so the salesman would have heartburn of that. But I'm like, and then some places you just didn't want to leave. They had such camaraderie, such they worked so well together. They were just they nobody was out trying to prove that they're better than everybody else. They were just trying to make the customer, get them the machine or the service, or make the product as good as possible. And it's just such a range. And I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, why are the cultures so vastly different? And of course, leadership at each facility, promotes different types of cultures. And there's such a age gap from boomers to, now Gen Z, right? In these facilities that you don't even know what you're going to get. You could have something that feels like you're out of the 60s or something that feels like you're out of the 22nd century, But yeah, so it is amazing how many different cultures and I guess not a lot, a lot of people, maybe they have 4 or 5 different jobs, so they've probably been through 4 or 5 different cultures, and they can relate to what we're saying there about how cultures can really affect not just the efficiency and the effectiveness, but also just the satisfaction of the employee. And I think in today's world, especially in the US where people change jobs every 3 to 5 years, if you're investing in a high tech person, if you're going to invest in training, invest in education and mentoring, having a good coach is so important. Or you're gonna keep having turn. I've met a lot of people that are like, we just can't keep somebody in this position. Well, it's because you guys are a bunch of jerks. It's not your pay. It's
Absolutely.
it's not what they have to work on. It's just that you guys are unpleasant to be around. I wouldn't want to work here, And
Yeah.
so, just some random thoughts about culture as you were talking about that. But that was going through my head.
People need a certain amount of money, right, to
Oh
pay their
yeah,
bills and live. But beyond that baseline, money isn't much of a motivator. But good culture is enjoying where you work, enjoying the people with whom you work. Even though I haven't worked at a lot of places. I had a few internships, and I had even after I started Pipeline, and it was just me. I worked at a few places contract, right, for
yeah.
3 months, 6 months, things like that. There's this one place I worked. It was an automation place here locally. I won't say the name. Actually, I think they're gone at this point anyway. Anyway, the owner, I think maybe he was bipolar, is my guess. Sometimes he would be super nice. In fact, I remember when my wife and I had our second child, he gave me, I was a contractor, right? So I didn't have any PTO or anything like that. He gave me 2 days pay while I was, just out at the hospital with my wife and son. I thought that was so kind and generous. So he had these moments when he was just very thoughtful. And then other moments where he was a tyrant. He'd walk into the office, just start yelling at people, literally yelling at people.
Mhm.
I had never been in an environment like that before, a work environment like that. And so it was a shock to me. And you could see the effect on culture. People were scared of him. They were not performing at their best because they didn't know what to expect when they showed up at work. So when I started Pipeline, I decided that I wanted to have a strong purpose and core values. Now, people talk about purpose and core values, and I think oftentimes they end up as platitudes on a wall that don't really
Mhm.
mean much. They're
Yeah.
corporate marketing bullet points, basically. I like to think that our purpose and core values are things that have actually meaningfully contributed to the culture that we have. And that shows up in comments from team members. I've been approached by team members. We do one-on-ones where we just, create an open forum for people to talk and share. If they have questions or concerns, they can talk to me directly. And in these one-on-ones, I can't tell you the number of times where an engineer has said to me, I didn't know it could be this way at a company. This is the best place I have ever worked. I'm not afraid to tell you what I actually think, and these comments go on and on. So the purpose that we have at Pipeline is to promote joy in the lives of our team members. Now, before you stop listening because you're thinking this is way too woo-woo for me and hippy-dippy, I'm telling you that a happy employee, a happy engineer is a productive and effective engineer. This leads directly to productivity. In fact, one of our core values is focused on productivity. But if you ask why enough times, you look at what you're doing day to day and ask, why am I doing this? Well, here's the reason. Okay, what's the reason for that? Why? Keep asking why. In my opinion, you ultimately end up at joy. That's really why we do anything, because we want to experience joy in our lives. I won't get too philosophical about that, but in the doctrine of Aaron, that's why we do pretty much everything we do to experience joy. So that's our purpose, is to promote joy in the lives of our team members. And then we have our four core values. We have number one is treat the customer well, but treat your team members better. Number two is governed by productivity, not bureaucracy. Number three is suffocate chaos, promote order. And number four is prevent surprises. And we use these core values to make decisions and to manage and govern the company. There was one example. We moved into a new building years ago, and in this building we had a warehouse where we'd build, machines and automation and things like that. And one day, an engineer had, I can't remember what, a drink, or maybe it was even, some food or something like that in the build area. And our director of engineering walks in and he says, "Hey, you can't have food in here. Like, we're building machines, right?" Totally reasonable statement to make. Like, it's not safe for you to have food in here. Either you're going to contaminate the machines, or the machines are going to contaminate your food. Either way, it's not good for anyone. And so we had a conversation as a team about this, because while the sentiment I agreed with wholeheartedly, it creating a policy and just flat out saying no food in the warehouse didn't feel like the pipeline way to me. It didn't quite sit right with me. And I asked myself, why is that? It's a very reasonable request, right? No food where you're building machines. And just the idea of adding like layers of policy doesn't sit well with me. So we sat down as a team and said, "Hey, core value number one is treat our customers well, but treat our team members better. How do we treat our team members better in this particular situation?" And what we came up with was, instead of just adding a policy, we do something called governing principles and supporting behaviors. And so the governing principle is the high level, like, why, right? Why are we doing this? Why does it matter? And then some people do like having actual rules to follow, and that's fine. So the supporting behaviors are kind of those rules. And we empower our team members to circumvent those supporting behaviors if it's in support of the governing principles, which is ultimately all we care about. So for this particular situation, our governing principles are, we want to keep the humans safe. We want to keep the machines clean. We want an area that we can be proud of when our customers walk in, right? And they're not seeing, food wrappers or things. These are the things that we actually care about. And then we have some supporting behaviors that are things like, don't keep open beverages in we have a perimeter where this is the designated build area. Clean up after yourself after you're finished working in an area, things like that. And we found that the team really appreciated the fact that management didn't just layer on another policy, right? We had an open conversation about this. Core value number one, how can we treat the team better? And that's worked out really well. And we use that same philosophy, the governing principles and supporting behaviors in other areas of the company as well.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I think back to, I think it was The Seven Habits by Stephen Covey, and one of the things that he through his research he found was that you can't be efficient with the people, you can only be effective with the people. And what brought my mind to that was the fact that, like you said, some people want a bunch of rigid rules, some people don't. And in fact, every person is different. And so, there are some people who you need to have meetings with often to touch base with them. And there's other people who you don't have to have meetings with as much, because they're much more in tune with what you're thinking, the way you're doing things. And it's kind of like you end up just having the same conversation over and over again. But there are other people who maybe not know as much as maybe don't feel as in tune to the system. Maybe they're a new employee, and it can be very helpful. It's amazing the misunderstandings, as both as a father and being in this business, that I've seen other people have. You try to choose your language, your words, the extra words you use, trying to be aware of the connotations you attach to those words with different age groups, even in different areas of the country. And still people can get, and a lot of times it's not because of what you're saying. It was because of something else they were thinking about when you started talking to them. And so it's very easy for people to misunderstand. And that's why having open communications, those companies that have open communications like your company, I think do very well as far as employee satisfaction because then somebody's not going around with a ruler and a pad trying to get people in trouble. People are talking to each other. They're sharing with their ideas. They're sharing the thoughts and the things they're running into. And they get to talk through, like you just gave in this example, they get to talk through different situations. The other thing, as you were talking, I was thinking about too is, it's what do people want? And a lot of people have said this a lot of different ways. You say people want joy. I think people want to feel like they're part of a team. That team and that team has a purpose, a good purpose, a purpose that they can sign up for, they can believe in. So I want to create test stands that help my customer test their products quickly and efficiently so they're selling products that work to their customers. And they can't build a test stand themselves, so we build it for them. We want to do the best job we can for them, but we don't want to become slaves to them. We want to be able to enjoy, a good pay, a clean work environment, a happy work environment as we do this very valuable and important thing. And I think most people, and I think a lot of times and again, with my youngest son is still in his late 20s, but some of the jobs he's worked at and the stories he's told me, it's like he's definitely not feeling like part of a team. You get a college degree, you go work as an engineer somewhere, and when you don't feel like a part of the team, there's really something wrong. Like he's had piece jobs during the summer, during college where he just worked either at a UPS facility or at a injection molding place, just doing piecework, right? And you really weren't, there wasn't a big team. It was like you had to move so many boxes from here to there, right? So it was very goal orientated. But when you're in an engineering role or a higher level role, management role, you're working with the sales team or whatever it is, something above just, digging a ditch or moving boxes, something where you're doing a lot of self work, that team, the feel like you're all pulling together on the same road, I think for most people is very important. And that's what I thought of when you were talking about joy, right? The joy of work, right? Is that you're all pulling for a common goal and you want to achieve it, but you also don't, there's no slavery involved. There's no, well, we're just going to have to work 80 hours a week and we're just going to have to pay ourselves half as much as the other guy so our customer would be happy. Of course, that would be ridiculous. But in any case, so that I guess that's kind of my reaction to what you're saying. Do you see any of that in your facility in your business?
Every single day. Yeah. In fact, we had a customer walked in, this is a few years ago, right in the front of our office. As soon as you walk in, there's a large mural with our core values, right? Treat the customer well, treat the team members better, governed by productivity, not bureaucracy, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
And as
Hmm.
this customer walks in and he looks at core value number one, treat your customers well, treat your team members better.
Hmm.
And he kind of cocks his head and looks at me and he says, I think you have that backwards. Shouldn't you be treating your customers the best and then your employees? And I thought it was such an interesting statement to make, and I explained my reasoning, which was ultimately of course, we have to treat our customers exceptionally well. We need to bring profound value to them, or they're not going to come back. And we understand that.
Yep.
The best way to accomplish that goal of treating our customers well and getting them what they want is to treat our team members so well that they are overjoyed to be here doing this
Hmm.
work. I mean, if you were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to have this custom machine developed, who do you want working on it? The guy who's just showing up for a paycheck? Or the guy who loves being there, who enjoys working with his team members,
Hmm.
who feels fulfilled by the work that he does? So it might sound backwards to some people, but I mean, if you flip it and think about who's going to be the most effective at producing value for the end customer, it's the team members who are being treated really well and are happy there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we people do think that that's backwards because they think that, this is your job, so you should be miserable doing it, and you should wait on your customer like they're the second coming. And it's like, no, a better situation is the customer is overjoyed to do work with you because they know you're going to give them a great product and they know your staff is exceptional and top of the industry. And so they would expect that if you want to keep your highly talented staff that produces these phenomenal machines, then you're going to have to treat them extremely well. You're going to have to treat them more than just a customer who's, buys something every once in a while. You got to treat them like they're true members of your team, your family, and that they're the golden, they're the goose that lays the golden egg, right? You can have customers can come and go, but if you don't have these people producing these awesome pieces of equipment, then what's left for the company? And I think I've seen a lot of companies over the years kind of really go down in the tubes because they were treating their people so horribly they couldn't get anybody good to stay with them. And that in the short run, the lower price you may be charging may help business, but I think in the long run, if you have just so many different issues with your production, eventually you're just not going to get any more orders.
Yeah.
And that's just what I've seen from my experience. So we've talked a lot about these different topics, right? How does this or does this segue us into what you think the most important thing in automation is? Like, what is like if people are looking at like whether you're an OEM, an integrator, or an end user? I mean, as we're focusing on, trying to answer the question we put in the title of the podcast, have we gotten closer to that? Are we ready to talk about what you and your company say that is?
I think so. Yeah, we're ready for the grand reveal. This is not going to be a shock to anyone after we've danced around the topic of culture. The most underrated skill in automation, in my opinion, is people, is making people happy, and the soft skills. Right? A lot of people. You can learn the technical skills at college, but not really, or on the job. There are not many places where you can learn the people skills, right? How to communicate, how to get along, the soft skills of engineering, I like to call them. There's a book called Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. And he cites three pillars of building great culture that ultimately the purpose of culture, right? If we go back to our governing principles and supporting behavior, why do we care about culture? Who cares, right? Good culture, bad culture. Well, the why is because culture leads to good people. And that's ultimately the objective here is to build wonderful people who are happy about what they do and understand, how to communicate, how to get along with others. And in this book, Culture Code, he talks about three principles that are most effective for establishing environments, cultures in which people can thrive. And the first one is build safety. The second one is share vulnerability. And then the third one is establish purpose. We've talked about pipeline's purpose already. By the way, on the topic of purpose, again, some companies will have these just kind of generic like platitudes that don't really mean much, right? I think the purpose needs to be like a just cause, I think is what Simon Sinek calls it. He's got a couple of wonderful books, The Infinite Game and Start With Why, but he refers to purpose as a just cause. It needs to be something that is transcends just the technical side of work. And so ours promote joy in the lives of our team members. People hear that and they're motivated by it. I've received so many applicants for jobs here who say, "Hey, I read about your culture and I love it. I love what you're doing there. I would love to work there." Like, it means something to people on a deep human level. It's not just let's go out and make money. Of course, making money is important too, but there has to be purpose behind it. Anyway, I had an example of that first principle: build safety. Right, people need to feel safe in order to develop their skills. And unfortunately, there was a time in the past at Pipeline, our company, where we weren't doing so hot. There were a few reasons for this, but work was pretty slow. And I could see the writing on the wall that unfortunately we were going to have to let some people go. And this was another kind of pivotal moment for me as a business owner, because I hadn't had to do this ever before, right? And I thought, okay, how do I do this? How do we do this in a humane way for our team? And so the first thing I did was I told the team what was happening. I said, "Hey, everyone was probably aware that we've been slow for a while. Here are our financials." Like, I actually show them the full P&L, right? Like,
Sure.
here's what's going on. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to. We started with a few furloughs, and I said we're gonna have to furlough some people if this doesn't change in the next 30 days.
Mhm.
And I was really reluctant to say that because I didn't want to scare people, right? I didn't want people to think, oh, shoot, I'm going to lose my job. I better just bail right now and go look for something new. I was really worried that that would happen. I certainly didn't want to lose any of our best core team members. But I thought, core value number one, I think the right thing to do is to tell people where we are and what might happen. And sure enough, things did not turn around. We did have to furlough some people and eventually let some people go. But not a single person was upset with me when they were furloughed or let go. In fact, I had so many people on the team contact me and say, hey, I've never been at a company where they were this upfront and like told us what's going on. Thank you. None of the core team members left. And it sucked that we had to lose some people, but in the end, we were stronger for it. And everyone just really appreciated that openness.
Yeah, yeah, and I can think back to some of the great people I worked with who, went through at our monthly meetings and talked about earnings before interest and taxes and revenues and it really helps you. I think it's easy for somebody to just assume that this is a big company, they just make lots of money, and I just come show up 8 to 5 and everything's going to be great. And in most cases, that's not the case. Now, the bigger the company, the less visibility you'll have into that. But the smaller the company, the more visibility you have into that, and I think that's important. And a lot of times, you know, this cycles to the economy. Things go up and those goes down, and people have, most companies I've worked with, they've been layoffs over time. So it's never pleasant, but it's part of the cyclic economy that we've been through
Yeah.
this less many decades. That said, I feel like we've left something out. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up before we wrap up and talk about? I want to talk about your podcast again. I want to talk about the expo again. But what are the things as far as um, people and that really it's people and culture that are the most important things in our industry today? Do you want to?
Yeah.
Can you expand on that at all?
Yeah. There are a couple of specific topics or principles that I've noticed a pattern over the years with engineers when it comes to their non-technical skills, right? Their communication skills. One is that engineers generally don't love asking for help, and it's not because they're prideful. It's because as technical professionals, what we love doing is solving problems.
Mhm.
So it's fun for us to sit and like work through a problem and just, spend whatever time we need to solving that problem. Unfortunately, that doesn't work so well on the commercial side of things, right? So a skill that I try to cultivate here at Pipeline and with engineering groups that I speak at is the skill of asking for help early. There's a non-engineering example I have. I have engineering examples as well, but I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. So I'll share a non-engineering example. My team and myself, we were at a large trade show a couple years ago, and I had recently purchased a Rivian R1T truck, and
Yeah.
I love the Rivian. I'm not afraid to admit it. I'm a fanboy. Love the company, love the product, love everything about it. But it was my first EV, and I wasn't super familiar with it yet. So here we are at the hotel in the morning, getting ready to leave to go to the trade show, and I could not get the charger out of the port. We didn't want to pull too hard, of course.
Yeah.
And, we're engineers. So we're like, okay, there's a latch in there and the mechanism's not disengaging. How do we get it off? And I mean, we were starting to get to the point where like we're getting flashlights and tools out. We're about to take things apart, right? And we probably spent like 10 minutes trying to figure this
Mhm,
out and,
mhm.
and didn't figure it out. And when I saw the toolbox come out and I was like, all right, hold on, guys, let's not do that. We just called Rivian support. And we said, this is what's happening. How do we get it out? And in 5 seconds, they told us how to get that charger out of the port. It was so simple. It was just something that I had neglected to do because I wasn't super familiar with it. But the point is, spend some time trying to figure it out on your own. Build that muscle because that is important. but don't spend an obscene amount of time trying to figure it out yourself. Ask someone who knows how to do it. Try for whatever a reasonable period of time is, and that depends on the scope of the task, right? Might be 30 minutes, it might be a few hours, might be a few days, but ask for help soon. It's okay to do that, and it will be so much better for you and your business if you can learn to do that. Um, uh, Another one of these soft skills is apologizing when you're wrong. We all make mistakes. It's understandable. It's expected. We're human. We make mistakes. That's fine. Just apologize when you've made a mistake. Another non-engineering example of this, long time ago, probably 20 years ago, I was driving down the road, came to a stoplight, and it was turning red. And so I changed lanes, probably kind of abruptly. I can't remember why I didn't change lanes, but I did. And then I stopped at the light. And all of a sudden, I see this motorcyclist come up on the side of me, and he's yelling and he's gesticulating, and I realize he's looking at me. Right, this is this big dude, tattooed up, like not the kind of guy I would want to mess with. I'm not a big guy myself. I was like, oh crap, what have I done? And I roll my window down. And he said, "You cut me off. You almost, sideswiped me on my motorcycle. You could have caused an accident here." And I realized that he was right. I didn't like check before, or not well enough. And I just said, first thing I said was, "I'm so sorry. You're totally right. It's my fault. I'm in the bad. Are you okay?" And it was amazing how this guy went from a level 10 of anger and fury down to 0, just like that. He said, I'm okay. Don't worry about it. And that was it, right? A simple apology. These things, they seem small, but the soft skills, they matter so, so much. The last one I want to talk about is being a principle that I teach here at Pipeline called being respectfully aggressive. Now, time is a big deal in our industry. We need to get things done fast, and it seems like the more the years march by, the faster our customers' expectations are that we can get things done. And this partially goes back to asking for help, right? There's a way to ask for things to be done more quickly, and in a way to not. I'm going to go back to Rivian here, my fanboy. So they have mobile servicing that they'll do for your vehicle if something's wrong. There was something wrong with my vehicle, and I called up and said, "Hey, I'd love for your mobile servicing to come out." And they said, "Great, we're about a month out right now." I was like, "Ugh, a month? It wasn't a critical item." So I said, "Okay, fine, I'll wait for a month." But then I thought, I'd really love to get this taken care of sooner than a month. And I called them back the next day and I said, "Hey, I'm scheduled for a month from now, but is there any way we could do it like next week?" And I was super nice about this, right? Respectfully aggressive. And they said, "You know what? Not the mobile, but I think we might be able to get you in like in the shop if you could do that." And I said, "Yeah, that's not ideal, but sure, I'll do that so I can get in earlier." And then I thought, we scheduled it for like the following Thursday or something. And I said, "Next Thursday is a lot better than a month from now, but man, I sure would like to get it taken care of even earlier than that." So I think this time I may have texted them or something. I was like, "Yeah, I'm scheduled for next Thursday. Probably no way you can do this. And I totally understand. You've got, plenty of customers that you're supporting. Is there any way that I could maybe get in Monday instead?" And they said, "You know what? We're not sure if we can get you in Monday, but give us a few hours to look into it and we'll get back to you." So this was on a Thursday that I had sent this last message. The next morning, Friday, a mobile tech shows up at my house and he says, "We had a cancellation. We saw your notes and I'm here." So it went from a month out to next Thursday to requesting next Monday to the very next day, Friday. And so this principle of being respectfully aggressive, it can dramatically move the needle in your projects. I can't tell you how many times we've had vendors say, "It's going to take us 3 weeks to get this part to you." And I'll be like, "Guys, respectfully aggressive, call them up, be nice about it, but let them know what we want, what we need, and ask them not, can this be done, but how can we get this part by, 2 days from now or whatever it is." And it has moved mountains, that principle, being respectfully aggressive. So those are a few of the common themes that I've seen when it comes to like the soft skills of engineering and people development.
Yeah, and I would add to that too. A lot of times it's so easy to assume the other person knows your state of mind or knows your urgency. But that's not always true. And I know in just in my history of people upset they needed a PLC quickly, but when they called and they said, "Do you have that PLC?" It's like, no, they're back ordered for a month. They just said, "Oh, okay," and they hung up. And then they got all mad with their staff. And it was like, whoa, if you told me this is an emergency, I mean, there's several different things we can do. If you just want a plain Jane one off the shelf, you don't want to pay any special shipping, yeah, then yeah, they're backed up a month. But if you have an emergency, let's say you have to bill it this week, or you have to install it this weekend, or you're in a down situation. There's like, look, you have to tell us if you're down. If you're down, we do anything. We'll take it out of the showroom. We'll go to another customer who has spares and buy one back. I mean, don't assume that the person you talk to knows. Again, maybe they just get off the phone with a family member. Maybe there's some hardship going on in the family. Maybe somebody got hurt. Maybe somebody's in an accident. Don't assume that they're 100% dialed in. If you have an urgent need, be respectful, like you said, but be aggressive too. Don't settle for no right away. And sometimes no matter how forceful you are, it doesn't change the situation. But in any case, I agree with that. Another thing too is asking for help and then sharing what you learn, right? I think these are very important things. So I used to love going to the factory, talking to the product managers, and then coming back and sharing that with the engineers, saying, "Oh, there's this new thing you could do here. Like your Rivian, you may not, this isn't obvious, but you're going to love it because it's going to save you tons of time. So you go here, you do this, and then look at what that gives you, right?" And so you can always have insight into why the software is designed a certain way. But if you know of a trick or a feature or something that you can do to make lives easier, then share it. And I know there were so many cultures that I got the experience where sharing information, you know, the people always thought that I can't share any of my secrets because when it comes time for the layoffs, I got to be show that I have value and that I know things other people don't. And God bless you if that's what you think, but that's not. I've never been that way. Share everything, save people pain, save people agony, help
Yeah,
them be more efficient. Be a true team member. Nobody wants a ball hog. I played basketball as a kid. Nobody wants a ball hog. They want people who are going to pass it to whoever's open, right?
that's right.
That's and that's
Absolutely.
kind of attitude. But also, I have this issue with my car. I'm a Dodge Charger owner, and the damper wasn't closing. So in the summer, it's only 95 here in the summer, not 100, 110. But in any case, the dampers weren't closing, and it's been this way for a while. And I'm like, ugh, I don't want to take apart all the different. I'm thinking that one of the ducts is stuck, and there's maybe some leaves or something in there. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be nightmarish. Should I get one of those telescoping cameras to go through all the ducts, see if I can find it? And so I was really just dreading it. And then I said, I'm going to research this. Maybe I'll get lucky, right? Maybe it's, and in researching, I found it was a $30 part. It was actually a humidity sensor that's mounted right on the side of my mirror on my dashboard that stops that from closing. And I'm like, really? In literally 10 minutes, I had it off and back on. And now I have cool air conditioning again. And
Beautiful.
it's like if I hadn't, I just imagine I could have dismantled all the ducts, taken apart the dashboard. I could have done so many things, wasted so much time just to find out, just with hey, and a lot of times you don't have luck when you search on these things. You don't find the answer you're looking for. I know it's frustrating, but if you know somebody, you can call them and ask them. I think that's when humans are best is when we're working with each other, helping each other and also educating each other on these type of things. So just a couple stories to add to what you were talking about.
I love it. Thank you for adding those, Sean. Yeah.
Now, I want to make sure as we come to the end of the show, I do want to make sure we cover the expo again. So let's go through that, and then we'll talk a little bit about your podcast before we close out. So give us all the details again. If somebody just tuned in, or maybe didn't have a pen when we talked about it earlier, now they're ready to text themselves, so they got a pen to write this down on. Tell us the details about the expo one more time.
Yeah, the innovative format that we're doing here is, again, you're not showing up and just getting a brochure or a flyer from a vendor. You're receiving meaningful training on technical topics, right? So I talked a little bit about there's like FEA and PCB design and programming robots and motion control, linear motors, GD&T, all these different things. We have I think 35 instructors, and some of these instructors are actually teaching two topics. So there are, I'll call it, I don't know, 35 plus, maybe 40-ish different training topics that you can sign up for. There's an event website. And once you register for the event, you have access to the event website where you can see all of the different training sessions. You can see the training sessions even before you register, of course, but you can see the time slots where all those different training sessions are scheduled. You sign up for as many as you want. Conceivably, you could do up to a dozen. It's a 2-day event, 6 hours per day, and each of these training sessions is 30 to 60 minutes. So it's kind of a crash course. Some of them are more basic 101 type courses. Others are more advanced, graduate level, call it, courses for the academic analogy. And that's it. So just outside of Phoenix, Arizona, October 21st and 22nd, that's a Tuesday and a Wednesday. Show up and we're going to have a good time in person. It's all about learning and education, connecting with other like-minded engineers. The focus is really on really, truly practical information and knowledge that you can go back to work and start using right away and sharing with your team members. Many of the exhibitors are going to be giving away tools or materials that you can take back and share with your team so that you're not the only one who benefits from this training.
Yeah, and so give us the website again.
pdexpo.engineer. So pdexpo.engineer.
And guys, I will try to get that in the show notes. So wherever you're watching or listening, whether it be YouTube or Spotify, iTunes, the Automation blog, you'll have access to those links so you don't have to write all that down. But I did want you to go through it. A lot of people do listen or they're walking the dog or mowing the grass or whatever. And so I wanted to make sure we gave that out. Very easy to remember, folks. But please check that out. So valuable training. I think you said it was $295. It's
Correct.
very difficult to find at that price point. And check out the website and see if there's something either for yourself or maybe for one of your junior people that would make sense, especially if you're in driving distance. But even for that price, it's and typically the hotels in that area are fairly reasonable because of where it's located. It's not like you're, New York City, right? Or
Right.
downtown, right? So in any case, check it out and if you do attend or you have somebody attend, let us know. We want your feedback. I know we got several weeks here before it actually takes off, but I will remember that we had this podcast. So please feel free to come back to the show on any platform and leave your comments. Let me know what you think. And if I was in the area, I'd definitely be checking it out. With that said, let's talk a little bit about your podcast before we end here. So you mentioned it earlier. It's an engineering podcast. So tell us a little bit of what is the podcast? What's it called? What do you cover? And where can people tune in?
It's called Being an Engineer, and you can find it on all the major podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. And this whole thing started over 5 years ago. So we're in season 6 right now. We have over 300 episodes that are out there. We release a new episode every week, and we just interview engineers, largely senior level engineers, but sometimes we'll have newer engineers in there as well. And we ask them about how they do their work. What are some pro tips, some insights that you can share with us to help us work better, to help us become better at this profession of engineering. And there's some really cool episodes out there. We have the founder of SolidWorks, John Hirschtick. He was a guest. We had the flight director for the Mars Curiosity mission, David O from JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab. He had some really cool stories about being the first person to see this rover land on Mars and living on Martian time for like 6 weeks as the rocket flew up there. Yeah. So anyway, lots of episodes out there. We don't get super technical. Occasionally, we will go into a technical topic and talk about it a little bit, but it's more along the lines of how do you do your work, and what are some pro tips that you can share with the rest of us.
That's awesome. That's great. So guys, check that out. I know I only do a podcast. We don't do one every day of the week. So I love having other podcasters on to talk about what they have because I know most of us have 10 commutes per week we need to fill up with a podcast or 10, 5 days or 7 days a week we got to walk the dog or whatever you do when you do your podcast. But in any case, Aaron, I want to thank you so much for coming on. And I want to wish you a lot of success with the event. And I would love to have you back on in the future to talk about what you've learned over the coming months and what happened at the event, and also talk more about your podcast and maybe go over some of your favorite episodes with other different engineers. But for now, I think we're going to wrap it up. I'm looking at the time. Aaron, thank you again for coming on the Automation Podcast.
Thank you so much, Shawn. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. I know I enjoyed talking to Aaron about all those different topics. And I also want to thank Pipeline for sponsoring this episode so we could release it to you completely ad-free. Thank you, Pipeline. We really appreciate your support. Also, don't forget there's a $50 off coupon on your screen now. If you want to go to the PD Expo, check it out. You don't find many two-day training sessions that cost just $295. Also, don't forget to check out Aaron's podcast and tell him we sent you. He has a lot of great guests that have been on. He has over 300 episodes, and it may be something you guys enjoy watching or listening to. And with that, I just want to thank you guys again for tuning in. I want to wish you all good health and happiness. And until next time, my friends, peace.